So hello and welcome to another RiderCamTV video, and today courtesy of Ocean BMW, which hopefully is in the picture now. They very kindly let us take out the G310GS. Obviously a brand new 19 plate, hardly any miles on the bike. It's a bit dirty because we've had so much of the Sahara sand just dumped on Cornwall over the last few days, which is a real nightmare. But I remember riding the 310R and how much fun it was, or the smaller 310, and it was so much fun. So to be able to take the 310GS out, I think it's going to be a bundle of fun. Now what I can remember about this bike is it's just really easy to flick about. You know, to say it's really basic will probably offend some people, I don't mean it that way, but it's not got loads of gadgets and gizmos like the Adventures, the 1200 Adventures or the 1250 Adventures have got, but it's got some pretty awesome bits of kit. I mean, it's got upside down forks. They've thought about the covers to keep the forks dry and clean, and it looks like a nice bike. Now what I'm not going to do today is talk about horsepower and brake horsepower and CC and all that sort of stuff, because I doubt whether I can remember all the figures. So it will be up on the cards somewhere about now, I guess. But really, it looks really basic, but I'm sure it doesn't ride like a basic bike. It sounds completely different because it's a different engine. The can sounds very, very different. It doesn't sound like it's very meaty. However, I'm really looking forward to riding this bike, and it's going to be a bundle of fun. So let's get out and see what it's like. So first impression is this lovely little GS. Now obviously it's not got the power that the 1200 or 1250 GSs have got, but that doesn't matter on a bike like this. This is made for different riders, you know, riders that want to enjoy it. We all want to enjoy our bikes, but actually this is quite funky. Do you find that the suspension does dip quite a bit, you know, when you're braking? But it's got a bit of poke. So first impression is a very basic bike. That's my first impression that comes to my head. However, the technology that's gone into making this bike obviously isn't basic, and the bike itself isn't a massively basic bike. It is compared to bikes like my 1200 GS Adventure and other bikes, but to be fair, it's not a basic bike. It's got all the things that you need. It hasn't got keyless ride. Well, actually, keyless ride's great, but you get used to it and then forget where you put your key. So I quite like the idea of actually having your key in a keyhole. And if the bike's running, you know you've got your key. It's as simple as that. Things like the seating position. Seating position is very nice, actually. You know that it's a GS or within the GS family because of the height and the upright, almost armchairish position that you're sat in. The handlebars are a great width apart. They're not too shallow, they're not too wide. They're just comfy. And things like the dashboard, you know, this even though it's kind of, to say disappointed would be the wrong thing, but I'm kind of, I suppose, bewildered that BMW on a 2019 brand new bike hasn't put a TFT screen on it. It's got a digital screen on it, and you could argue that the digital screen has got all the information that you could possibly want, and that of course is true. But when you're competing in a market where lots of bikes these days have got super duper TFT screens that show lots and lots of things about the bike, that have got things like connectivity and stuff like that all available on the bike, with Bluetooth and all of that sort of thing, that I don't know, is this lacking behind slightly? I'm not sure. It's also not got LED headlights and all that sort of gadgets and gizmos, but when you look at what this is a bundle of fun. it's quite strange because people will say, oh, that's not a reasonable, that's not a budget bike, it's 6,000 or 7,000 or whatever this happens to be. But to be fair, this bike is one of those bikes, just waiting for Mark, this bike is one of those bikes that people can get into the BMW world, and having, you know, there's a lot of people out there that slate having BMWs, that slate having different marks of bike because they're, you know, they've got an allegiance to a different sort of bike, I guess. But there are a lot of people that would be really happy and want to get into the GS eco system, if you like, the BMW ownership. Not necessarily to be part of the ownership club or anything like that, but there are people that want to be riding a GS, and they offer a training program called Rookie to Rider, which features the 310GS, which is a great way to get into biking. And this bike's certainly capable of doing 70 miles an hour, certainly capable of keeping up to speed on dual carriageways, that sort of stuff. It's really good at filtering, town riding, city riding, commuting, but it's also really good fun in a small package. I mean, it's a bike that you can take green laning, it's a bike that you can take off-roading, because it's so light. And, you know, does the power really, really matter? If you've got a bike that's light and it does exactly what you want to do. You know, we keep saying on these videos that that's why I like the motorbike communities, because whatever you've got as a motorbike, it doesn't matter. If you like the bike that you're riding, then it doesn't matter what other people think. You know, there are people out there that love Harleys, that will only ride a Harley motorbike. There are people out there that hate Harleys. There are people that will only ride a BMW bike. People out there that hate BMWs. People out there that only ride 125s or 250s or scooters. And people that won't even entertain that. And I think sometimes when we get a little bit narrow-minded into, I want to ride this, I'm definitely not riding a scooter, or I'm not riding this bike, or I'm not riding that bike, I think sometimes we kind of lose a little bit of the enjoyment for biking, where, you know, one of those bikes might actually surprise the hell out of you. It might actually be, without you knowing it, the bike that is suited to you all along. Now, I certainly found it out with the Kawasaki Vulcan S. I'd never ridden a cruiser type bike, and when I got on it, my God, the fun that I was having, it was amazing. And this is much the same sort of feeling for me. I've got on this bike and you can hear the engine, and it's like a 2-cylinder engine sound that's coming out of the exhaust pipe, so you know that it's not got as much power as the bikes I'm used to riding. It's not going to outperform those bikes, but in some ways it's going to outperform them. It's going to be cheaper to run, it'll do just as many miles, and people can get the same enjoyment out of it depending on what you want out of a motorbike. And I'm really quite enjoying riding this bike. So the seating position on this bike is very GS Adventure or GS style of riding. It's almost like a baby GS, a baby GS Adventure. You're sat very upright, which is kind of really comfortable. My thighs, believe it or not, aren't hitting the seat too much, although the seat does feel a little bit wider, a little bit harder than most of the other bikes that I'm used to riding. My knees aren't overly bent. My knees are just comfortable and I don't feel cramped, but I also don't feel like I'm fishing to find anything. I feel like I've just jumped on the bike and it feels like I could have ridden it for quite some time. The dials and the switchgear is really quite basic. You can turn your ABS on and off, surprisingly. You press a horn, you've got your indicators, your headlights, your flashers, that sort of thing, and your kill switch. And obviously your starter button, and that is it. You've got a button here that will allow you to change certain things on the dashboard, which is great. But it does what it says on the tin. And I would love if they had one on demo to take away for a few days and just go off-road and do a little bit of off-roading on it. I think this would really come into its own. But I love the fact that you can flick it about. Now the suspension, upside down forks on the front, and I do notice, as I mentioned earlier on, that when you're braking, that there is quite a lot of dip when you actually press your brakes. And I've also noticed that the pedal for the brake is a little bit spongy. Spongy is where I would go with that, spongy. But it's not a horrible feeling. It's spongy, but you know, it works. Let's overtake this cyclist. Woohoo! I do feel that the gear selector, although I'm not fishing around for any of this, any of the controls at all, with my feet, my hands, nothing. I have noticed though that I wear BMW Santiago boots, and I have noticed that specifically on this bike, the gear change, it's not as slick. Now I don't mean in slick as the fact that you can change gear. Obviously you can change gear really quite easily, but the manoeuvre or the mechanism of doing it seems to be quite hard on my foot, and I can actually feel for the first time in a long time of riding the pedal not fighting against my boot, but also almost a little bit harder to change gear. Now obviously this bike not having LED headlights or anything like that, it's got the normal bulbs, and I have noticed when I've been riding around, I don't know whether you have on the video, that I've noticed that on signs and stuff that the light seems to be wobbling quite a bit, and I don't know whether that's the suspension doing its job, because I don't feel every bump on the road, but you can see the light flickering on the sign, which is a little bit like that 30 mile an hour sign there flickering, and the give way one flickering quite a bit, which is a little bit strange. But the suspension, now I think you can adjust the suspension, but it is really quite soft, and I'll show you that when we have a little bit of a stop and a walk around on the bike. Now we were talking about earlier on about the visibility of this bike. Now obviously there's nothing in your way like an RT or a GS. There's no massive screen. That screen's doing its job. I've not had loads of air in my face, although we haven't really had a chance to get up to much speed yet. But what I have noticed is that one, it's got no handlebar grips, no heated grips, which is really quite odd because they could have put those on. They put them on all the other GSs and all the other marks, so why not put it on here? And also I've noticed that the switchgear is different. Although it's functional and it works, why have they gone for switchgear that isn't the same as the rest of the range, so that somebody getting on will know exactly what they're getting? Is it to keep the price down? I don't know, but I would have liked to have seen them have the same switchgear on this bike that they have on the Adventure, the full-size Adventure and the RTs and all the other bikes. On this one, this is such a fun little bike, and I'm really enjoying it. It's given me a lot of smiles, actually. It takes corners really lovely. I don't feel that it's fighting me at all. In fact, when I'm going around corners, I feel very in control. And I know that sounds really strange, but I do feel that going around corners, this is very much behaves in the way of the RTs do, because they're a little bit heavier on the front than the Adventures. I feel that going around the corners, and obviously they've got a different makeup at the front. We won't go into that, but when you're going around corners, the bike actually leans itself into the corner. So you're not actually having to fight as much as you would do, even if you don't fight with a bike. Hopefully you can get what I mean. There's less effort when you go into a corner to getting around the corner on this bike, which is really nice. And although a lot of people will think this is an underpowered bike, for those people, I'd say to you, come and try one. Come and see what it's like. It's not as smooth as a 1250 or a 1200 GSA. It's not as smooth as other bikes that this is competing in. But boy, it really is so much fun. You can chuck it about. You can do what you want it to do, and it's built for a bit of off-roading as well. Now, I'm not sure how serious you can take off-roading on this bike, but I'm guessing that you can take it as serious as any other off-road bike. I mean, certainly things like green laning. I've not done any green laning, but I would imagine that having a 1200 Adventure
or a 1250 adventure on a green lane trip, although it would work, I would imagine that that is an extremely heavy bike, especially when you get caught in bogs and that sort of stuff. But this one's really light. It's really light, and I'll put the specifications back up on the screen for you in a minute. But it's a really light bike, really light. The engine braking is really good on it as well. As you would imagine, most of the BMWs have really good engine braking, mainly because of their opposed twin. Now obviously this isn't an opposed twin, but the engine braking is really good. Look at that, really quite something. You know, and who would I say that this bike is aimed at? Well, I was thinking about this earlier, just before we were getting on the bike. I think this bike is aimed at anyone. I think this bike is aimed at people that have been riding for a long time, perhaps want to get back into biking, but don't want a massively powerful bike, but want to be part of the BMW experience, perhaps. They want to be able to say they've got a GS and they want the ability to do different things. They want to be able to filter and go to work and commute and all that sort of stuff. Also, I think this would, and specifically because they've got their Rookie to Rider scheme as well, I think it would appeal to younger people as well, specifically because the Rookie to Rider would take you through those different parts of the legislation and licenses that you need to do in the UK now, depending on what age you are, of course. And perhaps, you know, it's all about making money for people like BMW, of course it is. But when you think about it, if you can take a Rookie to Rider course and put part of that within the payment of the bike, and then come out of it at the other end with a bike and a license, actually this is a really good bike to do it on. It's not as underpowered as something that you would imagine like a 125. So if you're not wanting a bike that's massively powerful, but not one that's massively underpowered for what you plan on doing, because let's face it, whenever we get a motorbike, I remember back when I did my direct access course, I had a Suzuki GS 600, I think it was, or a 500, one of the two. Can't remember, it's so many bikes ago. And did my direct access, and it was restricted to 33 kilowatts here in the UK. And before I realised it, I wanted something quicker. And then I got a 650 Bandit, which I've got to say, other than my adventure, is one of the best bikes that I've ever had. It was so smooth, it was an inline 4, it went like stink. And I really, really loved riding it. But if the Rookie to Rider scheme was about then, I think this is potentially something that I would have perhaps considered. I would have potentially considered. Now obviously it's not going to get up to national speed limit in the blink of an eye like a 1200 adventure or a 1250 adventure is going to do, but it's going to get you there. It's going to get you there, and it's going to get you there in style because it's a BMW and this bike seems to be really well made. I'd say that this is kind of on par with a video we did not too long ago by Honda, the 500X. That was a lovely bike and I had so much fun on it. And this is, I would say that this is, even though it's got less power, this is kind of the same sort of genre. It's the, you know, a baby adventure bike, and I don't mean that in a nasty way, but it's obviously a lot smaller than a normal adventure bike. And in actual fact, it's I would compare it to that 500X. Now, asking which one I'd have over the other, I think that's quite a tough one actually. I really don't know which one I would have over the other one. They're both just as good fun.
Video. You would have just watched me ride this beautiful machine. This is the 310GS from BMW, a brand new bike. Well, this is a brand new bike, it's not a brand new model, but a brand new bike, 19 plate, and it's so much fun to ride. It really is. I mean, look at it, it's like a baby GS. A baby GS, and I don't say that to put people down that have got one, but it really is. If I was able to have one of these on the Rookie to Rider or that sort of thing, how cool does that look?
It's pretty nice actually.
It does, doesn't it? Now, it is very, very basic. It's a very basic bike. And I don't mean that in the way that it sounds. We've talked about where we're riding. The technology to put it together is amazing. That's not basic. And the bike doesn't ride like a basic bike. And you can take it off-road as well. I'm not sure
Really?
that... Yeah, I'm not sure how I would like to take it off-road or where I'd like to take it off-road. But it's got everything you should want. It's lovely. I can't really say much more about it. I love the look of it. I love the style of it. These knobbly tyres weren't a problem either. They were really smooth. I didn't get loads of noise like I get from the Anarchy 3s that I've got on my new one. It's like a rail train going down on mine, but really quiet on this. But what I would have liked them to have done on this bike is all the switchgear, as our cameraman, lovely Mark, comes over.
Lovely Mark.
Yeah.
My word. My word.
All the switchgear is very different to the rest of the range of BMW. And
I'll do that because you were going to do that.
yeah, and I'm not sure that it feels cheap or plasticky, because it doesn't when you're riding. But why have they not?
Can I make a completely bizarre statement?
Do it.
I think it looks a bit Honda-ish.
Yes, it does. It looks like they've all bought them from the same place. But why? I don't understand why they haven't used the same switchgear as the rest of the range. Because it doesn't seem to matter what else you buy in the range. You get the wheel, which wouldn't do very much here. So they could perhaps do away with the wheel, but you get that configuration of buttons, and you get things like handlebar heated grips, which you don't get on this. And I find that a little bit weird. Are they trying to keep the price right down for this bike so people can ride it? It's part of their rookie to rider scheme, isn't it, on this one, as the same as the other one. And perhaps they're trying to keep the price down for people. I don't know, but I don't know. In 2019, I loved riding it, but I get the feeling that they could have made it just a little bit better with a nice Gucci screen like the rest of the range has got. Don't get me wrong, this screen is
Let's look at the
and
screen.
has all of the information that you should want after it gets off its little service thing, because it's done 600 miles eventually.
Oh, there we go.
So it's got everything, and you can see it, and it's all in view, and it makes a lot of sense, and it's all in the right place. But the rest of the range has got TFTs.
Yeah,
perhaps
it's
not
a
as-
little bit too far for it, isn't it?
But is it? You know, if they're building this bike I thought this was very much like on par with the 500X from Honda that we rode a couple of weeks ago,
Ooh.
in the way that it rides, in the way that it feels. And then I was thinking, what would I have, the Honda or the BMW? They're both really good bikes, but I think it would probably be the Honda. It just feels a little bit more refined. Not that this one isn't. This one is a lovely, lovely bike to ride. And I'd be really proud to ride this if I was a rookie to rider, or just getting into biking, or younger, or even an older person wanting this to go off-road and have a bit of fun.
It does look nice though, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can flick it about. Filtering and stuff isn't going to be a problem.
And we had one of these on we didn't, but one of these went on a tour to Morocco last year, GS310.
Yeah.
It died on the way back, but probably for not the reasons you'd think it was
Yeah.
died. I think he was probably trying to keep up with faster bikes, which it clearly is not designed
Yeah.
to do. But apparently it performed really, really well till it died.
And you know, it's a really nice bike. I did find that the seat, really strange that the seat, although really comfy, it felt really wide. And I think it's this bit here where my thighs were going down. It felt wider than I thought it would do. I had no preconceived ideas about how it would be when I got on it. But then that was the first thing I noticed. Thought, well, that's a bit wider than it should be. But let's see if it's got the click on the.
I was just about to say, let's do the click. You're developing a bit of a fetish,
Yeah.
here, mate.
It's got a click, but it doesn't pass the click test. It's
Oh.
not a proper click. That's
Oh, no.
I would say that's more like a clunk. Now, when I was riding the bike, I'm going to get on with it, and we're holding all of this because we're hoping that the audio is a little bit better on the videos now. Although we're trying to find out different ways of making the audio better, so let us know whether it's better. I did notice that it's very, very, very spongy.
It's space opera.
Yeah, and I noticed that when I came to stop and you're using the front brake, there you do dip an awful lot, much more than I would,
Do that
much more than I'd expect. But comfy ride. Pedals and stuff are in exactly the right place. My knee isn't bent, and I felt very much in like an armchair style. That's why I called it kind of a baby GS.
Is that why they call it a GS then?
Yeah, it could be. He's splitting hairs yet again.
I wish I could.
These though.
Mirrors,
Yeah.
bane of our lives. We need them though.
But these are the same mirrors as on the GS Adventure. They're the same mirrors on the bike that I think you were riding. Most of the range have got exactly the same mirrors, but they could both do with being another inch wider, because all I can see is my arms, so I've had to angle them a little bit more, and I'm kind of getting a not a distorted view from the mirror, but a distorted view of where I want to see, really.
Is that screen adjustable?
No.
I knew that.
But if you come around this side,
I'm
Mark,
going around that way.
around this side, yeah.
Hang on, I'm being
One
guided
thing,
by the director.
one thing I did notice is that the side stand is really small. Now,
Look at that.
it's really small, and this reminds me of the stand that you have on KTM 1190s, 1290s, that sort of thing. It does the job, but every time I've ridden one of those, and every time I've ridden this, it doesn't. It feels like it's too upright.
Oh right.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
It doesn't feel like it's leaning enough. Of course it is, but it just feels like it's too upright. You don't get a centre stand with this one, which I'm guessing that they may be trying to push it for the off-road market. I don't know. Has got a chain. Enough said about a chain. The chain's fine. There's nothing wrong with the chain. It's got a lot of ground clearance here. There's no hugger and stuff, but then these bikes, because they're smaller, they're a lot easier to get in and clean.
Yeah.
And you know, with our adventures, there's so much gubbins in there.
Inches of clearance there.
Yeah. Yeah. They got nice cast wheels. I guess you can get the spoke wheels as well, and you can even take a pillion.
Look at that.
Clunk.
Look at that.
Clunk.
What size is the front wheel, I wonder? Well, let's have a look.
Oh, it's about that big.
There you go.
It's about that big, isn't it?
Go around this side, see if I can see.
Yeah.
We should be looking.
It's about that size.
Oh, it's 110, 18, 19. So it's a 19 on the front, 17 on the back, probably.
And it's a nice tucked away engine. The styling goes with the range. So it's in with the baby range, isn't it? One thing I don't understand, along with the screen,
Yeah.
because they could have made the screen perhaps a little bit more on par with being in 2019, but they're all bulbs everywhere. There's not an LED in sight on the bike, which I just find a little bit odd.
Because they've got to be cheap now, LEDs, haven't they?
Well, they're not only a little bit cheaper, but they last longer, and the what am I trying to say?
Who knows?
You've got a bulb, but the bulb's nearly never as bright as an LED, is it?
Yeah.
And it's not as captivating for people to see that you're indicating. So it seems strange that on the 2019 bike that they've got bulbs in there, but hey, it might be
There
down
you
to
go.
cost. But
There's
that's
not really a lot to complain about it, though, is there? Really?
no, and I'm not complaining about it. People say, "Oh, you're complaining about this bike all the time. You complain." Really not
Was that?
complaining.
Is that you on a computer then? Was it?
Yeah. Yeah, because we've had some really strange comments from some lovely people around the world, which is great. We like comments no matter what they are, unless they're abusive. If they're abusive, we just ban you. It's simple as that. But we do like getting lots of comments, and there's lots of people that keep coming back and commenting. It's great. I do like it. I'm not moaning about it. I would be really happy to ride one of these and happy to have one as my only bike. It's really, really nice.
Cool.
But there are some things that I would have liked them to improve to make it slightly better for 2019, I guess.
There you go.
So, if you like the video, give it a massive thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, it'll be somewhere or down below, and we'll see you in the next video.